So let me introduce myself first. I'm Abid Ur Rahman. I'm a graduate student at UMBC. I'm a project assistant at First Gen Network. So I have started this podcast recently. I've done only one or two episodes, and like we're planning to move forward with it. So you're one of the few first guests of our this podcast. So thank you for that.
I am honored.
Okay. So at first, I want you to introduce yourself because I don't think any host has done a good job introducing the guest ever. So the guest can like best introduce herself or himself the most. So introduce yourself. What are you doing? What are your goals? How have your journey been? What was your school? What was your major? What did you do after that? Like a brief walk through a journey of your life from uh
Sure.
from start to right now. Yeah.
So I am Lauren Hamilton Edwards. I am a uh, assistant professor, proud assistant professor at UMBC in the School of Public Policy, and my journey has taken me to several states to um, from living in many different places and many different circumstances. So it's long, but I'll make it brief. Um, and probably something we'll hit on a lot as we talk about being first gen is that I was born in very rural western part of Texas. And so
Okay.
the town I kind of consider my hometown. My parents haven't lived there in years, but I spent the most time there. Had a population of 942 people. So people talk about a one light town. We did not have one stoplight. And we had stop signs, of course, and a few horses. So,
You
so
are.
yeah, it's I grew up with the expectation of what a woman could be, and that was maybe working outside the home, but definitely a mom, a wife and a mom. And so
Okay.
there's, the best I was really thinking of at that point was, maybe I could be a teacher and have some sort of career. But I moved around a lot because my dad was in the oil industry, and that makes it sound like he was a businessman. He was not. He was out in the oil field. Started as a pumper, and he moved his way up. But in West Texas, that was a great career for a young man out of high school, just like coal mines in West Virginia or anywhere else. So that was the path he took, and they call us because the company he worked for, and a lot of oil companies transfer you a lot. So they would call us oil field brats. So I don't know if you've ever heard of military brats. We were the oil field brats going from
Yeah, I've
city to
heard of
city.
the military brats, but like this is the first time I'm hearing like oil field brats.
Yeah. So it was, moving around quite a bit, hard for a shy kid. But I think for me, it was important to get to meet a lot of different kind of people. It's made me a very open person and a very closed upbringing. And
Okay.
so, I grew up very conservative Southern Baptist. So
Okay.
religiously, it was rural America, basically. Um,
Yeah.
and then my last few school, I went to Farmington High School and then another high school in Farmington. So that was a complete different change. I had 700. No, I went from 70 people in my class to 800. So um,
Yeah.
it was quite a change. I kind of relished it. It was good to be a small fish in a very large pond. And I ended up skipping my senior year. I was just really bored. And so I went, my parents told me, all right, you can skip your senior year, but um, you have to go where your brother goes to school because I have an older brother who's 3 years older than me. I said, okay. So my plan was to stay a year and then move on. I really wanted to go to Wellesley. Um, because all I knew from my context is that is where smart women went. And I really wanted to go to Wellesley. I knew nothing about it. I didn't know what it meant to be liberal. I didn't know anything. And so I went instead to Hardin Simmons University in Abilene, Texas, where my brother was playing football. And they, it's still conservative Baptist school. And I kind of thrashed around looking for my major and ended on theology. And so
Okay.
my undergrad, I think it's actually called church ministry. I was training to be an overseas missionary, essentially.
Okay. So quite a turnaround, like being assistant professor in public policy.
Yeah, yeah, very long way, but not too
Yeah.
long, it turns out, because one of my professors, a female, I was watching how she was able to be a mom, a wife, and still have a life of the mind, which I knew that's what I wanted. And so I thought that's when I realized, oh, I can be a professor. I knew no way of getting there, right? So my mom actually has her associate's degree from a community college, but it's a very different world from the world of higher ed. And so I talked to people and I looked around at schools. I was really set on being a New Testament professor. And luckily never applied because my husband and I met in school. I got married at 20. He was 22, just finishing up, and that is not unusual from our context at all. It shocks people constantly, but it's not unusual for us, or at least where we were from. So my mom and dad were married at 16 and 19. So it
Nice.
was just fine.
Yeah.
And so, and we'll have our 20th wedding anniversary. So it's obviously worked out for us. We're
Congratulations on that.
very lucky. So I don't know how I chose so well before my frontal brain started working properly, but I did. So I got lucky. Uh,
Because you are expert in strategy. So
there
yeah.
you go.
That,
I knew what I was looking for. Um,
yeah.
the other really great thing that happened that junior and senior year is I decided to double major into sociology because I realized I wasn't going to be a pastor. You know, getting a PhD in anything is a long shot. And I started realizing it's not an easy road. So I thought to have a backup, I'm going to do this. And my professor sent me to go. He's like, Lauren, he's it was an urban sociology class. We only had 2 sociology professors at this school. So I took a lot of Dr. Bridges. And he said, you got to go meet the city manager of Abilene. I was like, okay, I don't know what a city manager does. We were supposed to meet for 30 minutes. He was an older gentleman, and I was there for 2 hours because lo and behold, I am very interested in city infrastructure. And I had no idea I was that interested in city infrastructure. And we were talking about drainage pipes for about 30 minutes, and I was captivated. Um, so luckily, I asked him, I said, so what's your degree in? And that's kind of when I started hearing about public administration. And I worked in an after school program where my husband was getting his master's of divinity and theology. And I was just fascinated. And the one of my clients, I worked with kids, and one of my clients' dads worked for the city, and he also had a master's of public administration. So I knew my
Okay.
next step. And that's where I headed off to. I also I applied to several different schools, and you probably found this as well. What are you, a graduate student? What
So
program?
I'm doing my master's in engineering management.
In what management?
Engineering management.
Oh yeah, go you. Um, the um, I I didn't. I thought I would have to go to a top school like I said, I had no context for this. I didn't know how to apply for grad schools. I
Mm.
was relying on professors from a Christian university that didn't have anything like public administration or public policy. Like we had political
Background.
science, but
Yeah.
I'm not even sure it was like a full degree. I think you could get a minor in it. So I kind of dipped my toe in and started talking to people, and I applied to UT's LBJ school. That was my first choice because I thought that's what I needed to do, was to go to the best one.
Mm.
And so we got, we started looking, and I also met with faculty at University of North Texas, and they had this great reputation in PA, but I didn't know PA. All I knew is that UT was the best school in Texas. So that's where I was
Yeah.
going to go. And LBJ, the policy school, is great. But when it came to what I was really interested in, city management in particular, um, UNT was like in the top 10 in the nation, but you wouldn't know that, right? That's not something that,
Yeah, like
yeah,
that's not something, if you don't have any context or if you don't have anyone familiar
yeah,
working there, studying there, you wouldn't know. Yeah.
yeah,
Same thing happened with me as well. Yeah.
yeah. And that's why UMBC is awesome. We're just kind of these unsung heroes, right? And that's what I went to as well, not so unsung now that I'm in the field. It's impressive, but I had no idea. And I sat down and talked to the outgoing director, and I said, look, I am, married and young, and I don't have a lot of money to be doing this. Do y'all have scholarships? And he found out I worked for mental health, mental retardation in Texas, which he volunteered for. So it really helped.
Really
And
helped.
so
Yeah.
I ended up getting a scholarship that paid for probably about 80% of my master's, books and all. And so
Yeah.
it was incredible. It was an incredible experience. I got into UT, I got into all my choices in Texas, and UNT just had the best deal. So at UNT, I also got to work for City, and that's where I was introduced to strategic management. I worked in the strategic planning office. And then from there, my husband and I both were fully planning on getting PhDs. We both applied. His was going to be in Christian ethics. And Christian like a PhD in theology and that kind of thing. You are one of many applying for those positions. I'm sure you find that in
Yes.
engineering as well, right? And
Yes.
our policy is more popular now, but at the time it was easier, or you were, one of a few. And when I say few, I mean like 50 people applying for 6
Yes.
positions, not
Yes.
200 or 300 applying for 6 positions. So I
Yes.
ended up also getting a scholarship that fully paid for my PhD.
Nice.
Yeah, but it was once again going to a school that wasn't on my radar, and foregoing the school that's a bigger name, at least in my head, to the school that was paying me, and taking that.
Okay.
So that it was tremendous help. I still don't know how I did it.
Quite a fascinating journey you have.
Yeah, so that's how I ended up in policy in
Nice.
Georgia.
Nice. So, yeah. From theology to public administration and policy, from Texas to UMBC, it was quite a journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even went back to Texas for a while. My first job was in Huntsville, Texas.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, Lauren. My second question would be, did you have any mentors while doing all these things, while being in a graduate school for the first time in your family, and you didn't have any context for getting a job or being in the field of corporate world and stuff like that? What struggle did you face during that time, being a first gen student or a first gen like graduate student or a job apply, and how did you overcome it? Did you have any mentors, or
Yeah.
what strategy did you apply
Um,
to overcome these phases?
hmm I had tons of mentors, invaluable mentors. Luckily, my husband had gone through his master's, so there was that that's kind of support at home. And then the bigger thing was, to have people back at Hardin Simmons really rooting for me. People who made me
Okay.
feel like I belonged in that field. So just as an instance, one of my professors, his name is Van Stivers, he taught Christian philosophy. I wrote my paper in that class, which is a very high-minded, like, you have to be thoughtful in the paper. And he said he liked it so much, he hoped I wouldn't mind. I think it was before we were so strict about FERPA and student privacy laws. He
Okay.
was at a coffee shop reading and grading and handed it to his mother-in-law to read. He enjoyed it so much. He's like, you got to read this paper. It's great. And he started telling me, like, not only should you go get your master's of divinity and eventually your PhD, you should also get it in philosophy. Because this is one thing you find when you're a good student, people try starting to funnel you into their field, because
Yes.
they want you to study. They want to recruit, right? So it was the first time someone told me I could do it. I think in a
Okay.
really, in a non, by giving me an A on a paper and telling me he enjoyed it and that I should go to grad school made a massive difference. It wasn't me saying I want to go to
Mm.
grad school and a professor going, oh yeah, you can do that. It was someone saying you should. And so after that, having faculty who are understanding in my master's, it can be hard.
Mm.
And it even in Texas, the University of North Texas, my accent at that time, I've had to work really hard on my accent. Um, because it is very southern and very Texan. And
Texas.
so
Yeah.
yeah, and so my faculty would make fun of me, and that has a different kind of effect, right? Every accent belongs, I should say, but when a Southern accent tends to lower your IQ to the people listening to you by about 10, because it's just, that people have assumptions about Southern people. And so, I would get a little made fun of for that. But the other thing, this is probably not mentoring, it's like de-mentoring. But the faculty member, we had to dress up in suits, and my family didn't dress up in suits unless it was going to church, and so I didn't have a suit jacket, so I went and got the best thing I could at Target because it's all I could afford. It happened to be denim, but it was nice looking denim. It wasn't like a jean jacket. It was like a
Yeah.
blazer. It was, and he got on to me in front of the whole class. And I didn't know any better. But instead of taking me aside or something like that, I was really shamed, because I hadn't been a part of,
Mm.
I guess, even though my family had gained in like status or whatever, my parents have always kind of had um, or their parents especially have always had a kind of lower income mentality,
Mm.
and so I didn't know how to dress for a professional gig. Just didn't know. So that that, but then on the other hand, the faculty there were super supportive of me going to get a PhD. I knew from starting there I wanted a PhD and did things to help me get there. So, and let me substitute classes when I needed to, for PhD requirements rather than their requirements. And so yeah, it was great, for the most part, and to have those
Yes,
masters at that level really supportive of going on. When I got
mm.
to PhD, my best mentor wasn't in the program at all. Um, we met him at my husband's church. He was a retired college president, and I had all sorts of hiccups through PhD. And he was there the whole time because my parents had no idea what to tell me what to do. I was constantly messing up all sorts of things. I always get through everything by the skin of my teeth. Um, so it was a rough go, but Lynn was always there, to help me.
Understood.
through it, how to move forward, and it was super invaluable.
Understood. One thing I've noticed, like I've planned, like with you, this is the third podcast I'm doing. So every, like the three people I have interviewed, everyone has a defining moment where they chose a career path and they moved up. And that phase, one professor, one teacher has motivated them towards them. They didn't have any clue. So like in every situation, one professor has told them that you can do it, go like towards this way. You have the ability to do so. And that actually like instigated the change in their life progression. So that is quite fascinating.
hmm And it's good for faculty to remember that they can be that person.
Mm,
And they can also be the person that squashes it, right? um,
yeah.
any sort of desire or makes a person feel like for years that they don't belong.
Mm,
I
okay.
hope I'm the first kind.
Yeah, hopefully. So, my next question would be, what does being a first gen mean to you? And do you think that first generation student is a negative term right now? If that is, how can we change the narrative?
I think it depends on who's saying it. Um,
Yeah.
of another faculty that I remember and I were actually having this conversation of whether or not we were really first gen, because our parents had had a few college classes. I claim the label because the college classes, that my mom has and the experience she had was great. It was nothing like what I encountered even at university, right, in my undergrad. So um, it, I, I came from my first position was at Sam Houston State University, and 70% of the student body there, at least when I was there, was first generation.
Okay.
So it can be seen as a negative, or you can understand where students are coming from and meet them halfway, or more
Mm,
than halfway, go further. So, just as an instance, people would complain because students wouldn't come to their office hours. And a faculty member told me, who was also first gen and a phenomenal teacher, told me, well, Lauren, of course they don't come to office hours. They think it's like going to the principal's office. They feel
mm,
like they're getting in trouble. And so I started holding office hours in the campus Starbucks, and people started coming to office hours to ask questions.
okay.
It's like because I was teaching stats, like I knew they were struggling, but they wouldn't come. Or students really had a hard time calling me Dr. Hamilton Edwards, and so they wanted to call me Mrs. Edwards. And people would be, I had colleagues that it really bothered them to be called Mrs. But because I came from that same context, first gen and rural, like many of our students, that was extremely polite. That's how they'd been raised, was to say Mrs. So and so to everybody. So, you can correct them, but do so in a way that doesn't make them feel like ashamed about it. Because if it really bothers you that much, make a joke out of it or something. But for God's sake, like let's not like make it even worse
Yeah.
because of ego, because they are doing the best they can in the context they came from. But on the other hand, I see it, and it's probably because I am one. It's progress, right? It's progress for my family. The day it's fascinating to me to talk to other first gen students when I'm not the only one that said this, when we crossed and got our hoods and was graduated with PhDs, even more so than with masters. I wasn't thinking about, oh my gosh, look what I've done. I was thinking about my great grandmothers who lived in very poor housing all of their life. Their husbands were sharecroppers. in Texas in the cotton fields. And,
Mm.
like this is what education can do, is it can propel an entire family forward. And so, and just being incredibly grateful for the women they were, not looking down on it. The older I've gotten, the more I don't mind my accent. I don't try to censor myself when I say ain't or y'all. Um, I'm over it. It's who I am. It's where I come from, and I'm
Yeah,
incredibly proud of the family I came from.
nice. Yeah, thank you for that. So, my next question would be, do you wish something you had while, do you wish something you had while growing up, like in these phases, like when you did your undergrad, when you did your grad school, when you went to your first job? Do you wish you had some resources or any kinds of platform where you could learn all these things? And if
Yes.
you wish you had something like that, what would be like that thing? Yeah. Like because like
So it's something
you
I
don't want to go you don't want to go there without knowing anything and like being stuck for a loop in a while. So what
yeah.
resources you wish you had while doing this kind of thing?
The first thing is gonna sound stupid, but it's not at all. I didn't know how to eat at a business lunch.
How? To eat in a business
How?
lunch.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But with that spread in front of you and multiple
Yes.
silverware, and I was scared to death to mess up, and it took me about 2 or 3 years to appreciate the dinner lunch, or the dinner, or the business dinner or lunch. Even worse, the business dinner, because there's more silverware, uh,
Mm,
glasses, and I don't know where to drink out of. It's super intimidating when you've not been in those circles, and it reminds you that
mm,
you don't belong here. So there were some things. I did attend a business dinner at my undergrad, but the
mm,
best thing that ever happened was in masters. And in my master's program, they handed out in our professional development class a pretend like a printout of what everything was on in front of you, and like the order of things, and yeah, it's so random, but there's these little reminders that, oh, this is, people just do this. And
mm,
kids that grew up in these more elite circles or educated circles know how to do this. I have no idea
mm,
what I'm doing. um, but the more bigger than that, I wish somebody would have taken me aside, and probably a lot of it is my context,
mm,
of being a woman in a conservative South in a conservative religion.
mm,
I didn't know that I should have bravery, or that it shouldn't even be bravery to ask for what I needed.
mm,
That I was allowed to be lost in class. I'm always super afraid of being foolish, or being seen as foolish, or like that my redneck roots were going to show. So I was afraid to ask for help. I was afraid to ask questions. I didn't know I could argue with professors about grades. If they messed up, I just took it. This is obviously wrong, but I'm not. They're the professor; they know better. They have
mm,
a degree, so I'm gonna trust what they do. And I just had no idea, like, how to advocate for myself, how to ask for what I needed in programs.
mm.
Um, I'm learning so much from Gen Z and younger millennials. Just like
Yeah.
y'all, I don't know what age group you are, so I won't assume. But those folks in those generations just name it and say, and people are like, oh, it's entitled, it's whatever. But no, it's saying what you need, and I wish I would have been able to do it
Yes.
as well. Yeah, so having some sort of, just having someone tell me that, or have people relay that in a way that's like, no, 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 this isn't going to the principal's office. This is, you messed up on my test, or your GA did, more likely, and I think I got it right, and if I didn't get it right, can you explain to me what I did wrong so I can do better
Yes.
next time?
Yes, so me also, I didn't know that you could do this. You could ask for help, you could ask for grade upgrade, or you could say that, may I know what I did wrong? So this kind of things we were not taught. So yeah, if somebody would have like taken me aside and said that, yeah, you can do this, that would be much helpful, and it would have saved much minimal time of my life. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of it's just cultural context. When you're taught to respect your elders and your, the authority, it is very hard to switch that off, because someone with a PhD is obviously on top of their game and authoritative. So I shouldn't question anything.
Understood. Okay. Wha- my next question will be, what suggestions or recommendation do you have for a network like us, like for first gen network of a university? What can we do to help the first gen students more? What steps should we take? What like platform should we build? Or what things we should do in general? What do you suggest?
I think UMBC does some great things already. For instance, having, I think Retrievers Essentials has a closet of
Hmm.
clothes for interviews, that kind of thing,
Yes.
which is super helpful. My parents could have afforded it, but I didn't ask for help once we got married. And now I know I could have since we've had talks, but we weren't well off at all, starting
Hmm.
out as a young married couple. And so I didn't have the funds to go buy a suit for an, an internship.
Hmm.
It made no sense to me. And those funds just weren't available, right? So that is incredibly difficult, and I'm glad UMBC is doing something
Hmm.
to fill that in. I also think having a network is just a great first step, to bring
Hmm.
people together. One thing I've really liked, I think I forgot to respond to your email last semester about were you doing the directory, first gen network directory? That something like that remind or shows students that we are throughout the university. We actually have quite a few people who started out at community college who are now at the very top of their field, with a PhD. So there's a lot of different routes to this, and it's not going to the best school, at
Hmm.
least in your head. It's not, yeah. So that's one thing I think that's super helpful is bringing people's stories, and showing. I would have loved when I was a freshman or even a sophomore and junior as I was figuring out my path, to have someone tell me, "Oh no, you're not the first one here. You're not the
Okay.
only one here." And it is harder. I also don't think we should shy away from the fact that it is much harder. Um,
Hmm.
Academia can be very cultish, and the language we use in all sorts of ways. And when you're not from it, it is really hard to navigate it. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, you're definitely an outsider, and reminded that you're an outsider a lot.
Hmm. Hmm. Understood. Okay. So we are almost at the end of our interview. So I have my favorite question at the end.
Okay.
My last question would be, give us some movie recommendation, book recommendation. So anything like, it doesn't have to be intellectual, it doesn't have to be thought provoking. It can, but what movies did change your narrative or change your life, or what do you like the most? Book, movies, and TV shows.
This is not part of the question, but I love podcasts with all my heart. But I'm also a
Okay.
huge book fan. But I've just started
Okay.
listening to them instead of actually reading them. So yeah, there's
Mm.
what can I give? Did you say recommendations?
Yes. Anything you want, like what did you like the most?
So I just watched. I'm watching a TV show on HBO called Somebody Somewhere, and
Okay.
it is fantastic. And it's a comic, and she goes back to her hometown of Manhattan, Kansas.
Mm.
And it's hilarious. I cry. It's one of those kind of shows. Um,
Mm.
but
Okay. Duly noted.
yeah, um, I have gotten to where I don't really like watching a lot.
Mm.
It's something about the pandemic. But I just read a book called that really resonated with me, and please don't be scared off by the title. It's called Sex Cult Nun. And it's by a woman that grew up in a very famous cult. Her
Okay.
grandfather was actually the leader of the cult, and how she broke away. Her story. And so,
Okay.
trigger warning, there's a lot
Interesting.
of sexual assault in it, but it's a phenomenal book. Educated is
Okay.
another one that I think every first gen student should read.
Understood.
Yeah,
Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren, for your time. It was wonderful chatting with you. I
great to
hope
chat with you.
we will meet further ahead also, and like we would do something together to help the first gen students.
Great.
Appreciate your time, and thank you once again.